We love sharing these stories with you through the Hiking Through Life podcast, and we're so grateful that you listen to this podcast. If you'd like to support the Hiking Through Life podcast further, we have these amazing new t-shirts and water bottles. The t-shirts come in 4 colors, and the water bottles are perfect for trails, adventuring, or daily use. Consider checking them out at hikingthroughlife.net/shop.
Use the code PODCAST and receive 10% off your first order. This is the Hiking Through Life podcast. We've all been gifted a journey called life. Let's see where the journey leads us today.
Hello, welcome to the Hiking Through Life podcast. It's Thursday, October 10th, and today is actually World Mental Health Day. And kind of, in honor of that, I just want everybody to think about their own mental well-being and think about, are you taking care of yourself? Do you have self-care? And just really reflect on that for a moment, because before you cannot take care of anyone around you before you are taking care of your own self. So just kind of reflect on that for a minute. Earlier, I was listening to this fantastic podcast, Happier by Gretchen Rubin, and 4 of the things they mentioned on that podcast to be happier tomorrow were to set an intention for each day, move every day, be grateful every day, and learn every day. And those are definitely things that we do at Hiking Through Life. And also, I highly suggest that you listen to our episode 5 that we did this past summer with our friend Allison, who hikes for mental health. So check that episode out. And yeah, I just hope everyone is doing the best they can for their mental well-being. And with that, we are going to get into Andy's Thru-Hike. He hiked the Superior Hiking Trail. He did it over 3 weeks, and he's back home now. And I'm super happy about that, because I was a little worried about his own mental well-being out there.
But you thought I was going to go crazy.
I did think you were going to go crazy. I've read a lot about thru-hikers and depression after thru-hiking, so I was a little worried for you out there.
Well, and you thought I was, being on my own, starting in the northern part of the trail and going southbound. It's a little more lonely. It's not, people traditionally go northbound, and at the beginning of the trail in the northern part, if you do go southbound, it's a lot less traveled. So I think some of your concern was coming from that as well, about how, not interacting with others for stretches of time may impact your mental well-being. And so I think you had a healthy concern, but I kind of viewed it a little bit differently. I was actually welcoming some peace and quiet for a while.
Yeah. And yeah, you didn't go crazy. I do know when we did see you that day, the week after you started, you seemed a little out of it, but we'll let you talk about that. Before we dive into that, let's just talk about how the thru-hike went generally overall. Did you like it? Do you want to keep thru-hiking?
Yeah, so I loved it. I can't say I loved every moment of it, but there was definitely ups and downs.
Yeah, let's talk about like your first week. Just being on the other end of it, it seemed like that was your biggest adjustment period.
Yeah, and I think that's how it would go for anybody for their first thru-hike, is that initial period of adjusting to that, I guess, more rigorous schedule that you may not be used to if you're only used to doing little section hikes.
Right, like 5, 6 miles a day.
Right, and that's kind of how I was at first. I was only used to going at most a week at a time, 5 days, I should say, and over those 5 days, it would be taken a little more slowly and doing less miles than I had intended on this trip. So it was maybe 6 to 8 on average that you and me would do when we would go out on a section hike. And this trip, I was trying to go for 15-mile a day averages, and I just hadn't ever done that before. I think the longest I had ever done in a day with a backpack, I think was about 13 miles. I think we did that in Jasper.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was like a whole day event basically. So doing 15 miles a day for 3 weeks is it's a bit more than I anticipated. I mean I knew I could do it. I was sure that I would be, I guess, physically able to do something like that, and I just wasn't anticipating the, what would you call it? I guess the wear and tear that you kind of go through doing it day in and day out for 3 weeks. So, getting back to your question though about kind of how the first week went. The first week was very wet. I'll leave it at that, I guess. I mean, it rained constantly.
Your socks were
So,
constantly wet, it seemed like.
yeah, well, it's because my boots were soaked. I had a pair of the Merrill Moab 2s, and they're made with Gore-Tex, but they also have some ventilation, so they're not completely waterproof, but I don't think any boot really is completely waterproof. But once they got wet, it just took forever to dry out, and the weather itself didn't allow for them to dry out either. It either rained at night and made the ground very muddy and wet, or it rained during the day and I was hiking through the rain. So that first week, yeah, it was pretty rough.
Yeah, I was following like the Superior Hike and Trail Facebook group while you were out there and just kept looking at the weather and just, I mean, yeah, there was some hikers that were out for like a day on the Facebook group and they're like, this was awful. But yeah, I just kept being like, wow, I can't believe Andy is out there in this stuff day in and day out. And then, yeah, you called me that Saturday after you started your hike and you just sounded like you needed some trail magic.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess that would be, yeah. I needed something because my feet were just, they were not in very good condition at all. My boots had been soaked for a week straight. My socks, they were also pretty wet. I had a thicker pair of merino wool socks. They were not the quickest to dry out. So every day I would take my boots and socks off when I got to camp, and my feet would be extremely pruny. Looking back at it, I now would take some advice of some other thru hikers that I had read some things about and maybe put some Vaseline or another maybe protective layer on my foot to prevent them from getting so wet from being in the wet boots. So
Well,
that,
the
and
things you wanted
also,
me to bring that day, the gold bond.
yeah, that would have helped out a little bit too. That helped keep the feet dry a little bit, helped kind of with the scent of the boots too, because my boots smelled pretty bad. But also, it's just one of those things where if I would have taken some of those protective measures earlier on in the hike, my feet wouldn't have gotten as bad as they got. So, yeah, getting back to kind of what happened with my boots though. So, the boots or shoes or whatever footwear you have on, when it gets wet and retains some of that moisture, it swells up. So, really, it gets smaller on your foot. And then when you're hiking, as long as you do on a through hike, and you're hiking all day, your feet also swell up. So that combination made my boots too small, and it actually the heel of my boot started kind of digging into the back of my heel, and it really rubbed the skin back there raw, and it was pretty painful actually. And that's when I started calling you and said, "Hey, I need something. I need to switch up my footwear. I need these other things like the gold bond, some extra bandages, some moleskin,
Some more socks.
some different socks, yeah." So, it's one of those things where yeah, maybe I could have found my own way to get back to either Grand Marais or another town to switch out my footwear. But I called you also to kind of switch out some gear too, because I wanted to lighten my pack. Um, I I thought I did a pretty good job packing originally, but there were some extra things that I had that I didn't necessarily need. And after my feet were kind of wearing and just not in the best shape, I definitely wanted to get rid of as much weight as I could so that those 15 miles seemed a lot easier. So
Yeah, and I actually brought more food up for you, and you didn't want more food weight.
I didn't want more food weight. No, I felt like the weight that I had for food was plenty. Even though kind of later on I discovered that yeah, I was probably not eating as much as I should.
Yeah.
I probably should have been eating more on my through hike, doing that many miles in a day, but I was able to at least when I went into towns to resupply, I would eat a bunch of food. And I felt so much better the next day after that, after getting all of those calories replenished.
Yeah, yeah. Luckily, we were able to come up there and have a meal with you at the lodge, and yeah, you were replenished. I was still not gonna lie. After we left, I was still a little worried about your well being. When I saw you that day, you were a little out of it. You seemed like you had been in the woods for a long time.
Yeah, I was just, it was one of those things too where
You just
when
needed
everything
like
is
yeah.
going bad, like you just get in this funk. And I was in a funk. I mean, I was I wanted to go home, like at that point. And there was a time that day when you guys were up, and I'm very grateful for you and your mother and my mother all coming up and supporting me and making that 5 hour drive to come up to Lutzen just for the day and help me out. I mean, that was great, but yeah, there was a point where I was just like, is this through hike worth it? Like, you guys are here already. Maybe I should just hop back in the car, go home, reevaluate my situation, heal up, and maybe try it again another time and use what I learned this trip to not make those, I guess, mistakes again or let these situations get worse, like my feet. And yeah, I wanted to go home, but you said a couple things which kind of really hit home to me that didn't allow me to go home, and I'm grateful for it. And I mean, it sounds, I took it as like the tough love type of thing where you just said, well, this is the life of a through hiker.
Yeah,
Those
I
are
was
through hikers' feet.
totally, I was literally like, I've read all about this. Like, this is what every through hiker goes through. Like, you wanted this.
Yeah. And I did. I mean, I really did want
All
to
while both
complete
of
this.
our moms were like, oh my gosh, your feet, are they okay?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was one of those moments that I needed, though. It was just one of those things where I responded very well to, and just saying like, okay, I had been thinking about, the condition of my feet, the terrible weather situations with the rain and everything, and just saying, you know what, you're right. Like, I did want this. I did originally say I was not going to give up. I was going to complete this through hike. And I'm going through what a lot of people go through. And I had read this just like you had. I had listened to podcasts of other through hikers just like you, and everyone had a very similar situation in which they had to overcome obstacles. They had to overcome what was, you know, kind of taking them down during their hike. And that's what I was going through at the time. So I just said, you know what, you're right. I will do what I need to do to take care of my feet, but continue the hike. And so I did, and I'm glad I did, because the weather got 10 times better. The feet, my feet, they started healing up after that day. And getting the new shoes, I got these trail runner shoes instead of boots, and they, I think, were a huge, huge improvement. For one, they dried out quicker. And for two, they weren't as, I guess, rigid, and allowed my feet kind of some more flexibility in being able to expand when they swell up, and just have a little bit more give to them, so it wasn't creating as much issues like with blisters or with the rubbing on my heels and stuff like that.
Yeah, less band-aids to go through and
Yeah.
such. So yeah, like moving on from the feet, even though people can't smell the stinky feet that you had, they really were stinky. But moving on from the feet situation, let's talk about like the people and like, was there any trail magic besides us? And like, was there a trail culture on the Superior Hiking Trail?
Yeah, it's
Because
so
we're used to like the weekend being like weekend backpackers and such. Like, yeah, as a thru hiker, what's that like?
it was different. I don't see, well, there being a shorter trail for a long distance trail. The Superior Hiking Trail, if you do the total through hike like I did, is 310 miles. So it's relatively short compared to things like the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail. So there's not I guess, as big of a culture per se as far as through hiking. There's a lot of through hikers that I think go through this trail now,
It
but
seems like it's growing each year. Yeah.
yeah, and I met a couple on my trip, but it's not one of those things like you get on the AT where there's this huge group of people kind of moving through the trail at once.
Right. Like there's not like a trail family and you didn't even get a trail name.
No,
So it's
I
not like
didn't.
that.
No, even though I spent maybe half the time with a woman that I met, Allie, on the trail. I met her the first day, and it was cool. It was nice to have just a friend on the trail and somebody to kind of camp with. And that was like the kind of cool part about it too is
I was actually really excited when I found out there was another person. You weren't
yeah,
going to
because
be a
then I wasn't gonna
crazy
go
person
crazy.
alone.
So yeah, we were set out to do kind of the same time frame. She was expecting maybe about 3.5 weeks, and I was trying to do 3 weeks. But yeah, for about the first week or week and a half, we kind of had the same mileage each day and shared a campsite. Probably for the first about 12, 13 nights or so. So that was cool. And most of the times it was just like her and I at the campsite. And we didn't encounter too many other people on the trail or at the site. And I think like with the weekend backpackers though, that's the time that I saw the most people on the trail. Was the weekends, and it's understandable because most people have jobs during the week and can't get out.
Right. And the Superior Trail is just not like a desired like through hiking place. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not well known yet.
No, it's
It's
becoming more
yeah.
popular for sure
Yeah.
though, because I mean the Superior Hiking Trail is the first trail I ever backpacked, and I that was like 5 years ago. And those trips I did weekends, and it was not nearly as busy as it is now on the weekends there.
And I think so many people will go up to like the state parks that are up near the trail and be like, "What's the Superior Trail? I'll go hike this for a mile."
Yeah, the Superior Hiking Trail goes through 6 state parks actually, and it's cool. I camped at one of them, the Judge C.R. Magny State Park. That was the second night, and Allie was gracious enough to um, offer me a spot at her site. She had a reservation there, so I was very grateful for that actually because that was actually the longest day I did up to that point in my life. The second day I did 18 miles. I did some longer days later in the trip, but
It's a long
to
day.
do 18 miles on your second day when the most you've ever done in your life before then is 13 miles, that's that's pretty.
And with a backpack on, because I'm thinking I did 19 miles the day I went to meet you when you were finishing your
Yeah,
hike.
and that's pretty
But
ambitious
that was without a backpack. That was with a day pack.
that you did, yeah. But mine was my
Yours
second
is
day with
intense.
a backpack.
Yeah, that's
After
so.
doing the first day
Whew.
I did 13 miles, which
Yep.
tied my longest ever. So,
So how did you like how do you even motivate yourself to keep doing that? Like when you were like hiking by yourself, where was that motivation even coming from? Like,
I don't know if it was needed really. Like there wasn't really like
man.
it wasn't really something that I needed to motivate myself for. I think it was just something that I naturally like to do. And that's something that like even when we're out hiking together, it's something where I just like to keep going and I'm always like out ahead of you,
Definitely.
and me and Daisy are we're always taking our breaks and waiting for you to catch up. And
It's true.
not that that's bad. I mean, everyone has their own pace and everything. But I mean, those were, if you go back to that one 4th of July weekend, the first time we went to the Porkies, remember that? Where
Oh, I sat
you just gave
down.
up. You're just like, I don't know if I can go any further. And you just sat up against a tree and just had this like look of defeat on you. And I was like, Sarah, let's go. Let's keep going. And
Yeah.
It's just like once you get to the site, it's gonna all be worth it. And I don't know. That's kind of maybe the motivation behind it too. Is I'm always thinking like, oh man, it's just gonna be great when I get to the site. Set up my hammock, just hang out, just be in this awesome wilderness out here. And I don't know. It's just I don't think I ever really needed to motivate myself until I got to the very end of my through hike. I think I needed to motivate myself more then, just because like I was talking about earlier, I think I didn't replenish my energy as much as I should have. So there were a couple days where I was just like, man, I just want to keep going. I know I got to keep going if I want to be done in 3 weeks.
Yeah, okay, so speaking of energy, let's talk about like what exactly you ate each day because it was pretty much the same food each day. Let's break that down.
Yeah, so for breakfast, I would eat 2 oatmeal packets, just 2 instant oatmeal packets, and I would add a handful of craisins to them. Um, so I had that for breakfast. It was a pretty light breakfast now that I think about it. But then packed a lunch that was a tortilla with peanut butter. So I had a peanut butter wrap, um, a Babel cheese, a I had some beef jerky. Originally, I had these like beef sticks that I had found in our pantry, but then about halfway through the hike, it kind of switched over to beef jerky. I had a protein bar, and I think that was about it for lunch.
That's all I remember from the day that I practiced through hiking with you.
Yeah, so that was lunch, and then I had a Mountain House meal for dinner. Um, so thinking back on it, I mean, that was actually a lot less than I should have had. I probably should have had double that. Like, that was probably altogether about 2,000 calories.
And that's why I threw in like hot chocolate packets and like pieces of chocolate.
Yeah, and like for me though, like during the hike,
You just want to
I
go.
never really got super hungry. The only time I actually really got really hungry was about 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's probably because my breakfast was so light. So, I ended up doing was I would have my breakfast. Typically, leave camp about between 7:30 and 8:30, depending on how it went and how my sleep was. But I would then like have a protein bar at about 10 o'clock because that's when my hunger really came on was 10 o'clock. And then after that protein bar, it was pretty good for the rest of the day. I mean, I didn't really get that hungry, so I didn't really want to snack all that much. I would stop for lunch about midday, but then about mid-afternoon I would also stop and take my pack off, and then just have a couple pieces of jerky or so.
Yeah, like get some rest. I think a lot of like through hikers, from just what I've read, I've never through hiked, but it just seems like a lot of through hikers get in this mindset that's like, I gotta keep going, I gotta keep hiking, get those miles on. And they kind of, that's just their mentality. So stopping to take your pack off and stopping to snack is like almost a waste of time. Is that how you felt about it?
Yeah, I think that I did have some feelings like that, yes. I knew it was necessary at times. Like, there were some times where my pack was weighing me down a bit, and I was just like, all right, I gotta take this off. Um, so, like, some of my, like, shoulders, like, my traps and stuff were getting sore. So I was like, okay, well, gotta put the pack down, feel a little bit better, stretch out a little bit, and then get going. So I would stop and snack then. But I did feel kind of like, you know what, like if I just get to camp, that's more time for my feet to rest. That's more time for me to just kind of take it easy and just chill out and stuff versus doing that on the trail while I'm hiking. So I always had this, the goal was always get to camp. Like it's yeah,
Make
it's
a
it's
goal.
like a little weird, but
Yeah,
like
I
that's
remember
kind of like the motivation.
the day you called me. It was that the day before you were ending your hike, and you didn't have a goal to get to because you were in the part of the trail where there really was no campsites, so you had no goal.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's half the reason you called me to come up that night, because our car was going to be your goal.
Yeah, and this was like one of the last nights that I was on the trail, and yeah, it was that was kind of disappointing because there was like no excitement at the end of the day. I was just trying to figure out like
Because it was
since
like the section between like Duluth and the end of the trail.
yeah, in the southern part, yeah. So like the southern terminus
And like we talked about
through
that
Duluth.
in the podcast where we talked about Andy's through hike initially. If you listen to that one, he like explains how there's literally no campsites.
Yeah, so the very southern end of the trail for about 50 miles, there's no camping on the trail. So you either have to find a paid campground that you can kind of get to from the trail or a hotel or something like that. So like that was one of the things that I mean I didn't really want to pay for anything. I didn't want I just wanted to be out there and be on the trail. So some of the I guess lack of excitement or motivation kind of came from, well, there's nothing out here. Like I just have to go back to being kind of a, I don't know what you would call it, maybe a, I don't know. I just didn't feel like I was backpacking type of thing. I just felt like I was walking a trail and then, you know, going is like I was day hiking with a big backpack on, you know?
Because there was no goal, right? There was
Yeah.
no like home to set up.
Well, there was just
No
like
home.
no, yeah, there's no like campsites. There's no like, like when you're on the Appalachian Trail, you're going to the next, yeah, campsite or shelter, that's on the trail. And this, it was weird. It was a weird feeling because, I mean, for part of it, you're hiking through the city of Duluth. And so yeah, I found it very, I don't know, very peculiar because you're backpacking, but it's in a city. And I'm carrying my hammock and sleeping bag through the city and I can't put it up anywhere. So
Yeah.
it was a little bit of a struggle for me, and I
And
was
it's
just
not
like,
like there's like hotels in Duluth, but there's not like hostels. There's not like a backpacker hostel in Duluth that not that I know of, and you probably
yeah, I
didn't.
don't know of anything either, but
Yeah.
yeah, it was just like not what I was looking for. And I think that's why I wanted to save that part for the end, anyways. But at that point, I was just like, yeah, I'm just done. I just want to I want to hike as much as I can. Just go home if I'm gonna sleep in a bed, type of thing. So, that was, yeah, not exactly what I was looking for. But I knew, I mean, going into it, I knew it was part of the hike, and I could have done the traditional version of the through hike on the Superior Hiking Trail where you don't do that 50 miles from Duluth to the southern terminus. And there's a lot of people that do that. I think that's probably more popular than doing the total through hike because I think a lot of people just want to be out there and do the wilderness section that has campsites.
Yeah, that makes sense because like yeah, had I not come up that night in our car that still has our bed in it in the back of the Subaru from the summer. Like, had I not come up with the car, you would have ended up in just like in the woods probably, or paying for a campsite at Spirit Mountain.
Yeah, and well, I had checked in Spirit Mountain, didn't have anything left to reserve. I think they have some walk-in sites, um, and I could have maybe done that. But yeah, I guess my plan was just to kind of find a spot in the woods, which you're not supposed to do, and it's against like the trail regulations and stuff. And I don't recommend it, but that's why I was trying to look for some other campsite things that you would have to pay for. But if you wouldn't have come up, yeah, I probably would have broken some rules and just found a little quiet spot in the woods off the trail somewhere and hung my hammock up. So that's yeah. Anyways, you came up, we slept in the car that night, and it was a very cold night actually. So I'm actually kind of glad that you did come up. It would have been cold in the hammock. I mean, it was down into the 40s. I think it was 41 degrees when we woke up.
Yeah, I slept with my hat on and my gloves.
And we had frost on our windows in the morning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting. It was a different experience going through that last 50 miles than
So
what
do
I
you
would expect.
recommend that last 50 miles for people, or would you say just skip that?
I would say do what you are comfortable with. And for me, I mean, I'm glad I did it. I don't think I would have liked not doing it. I mean, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do the whole thing. And that was my attitude. Even though it was something different and something that I guess didn't necessarily prefer going through the city. I think that I really um, I really couldn't have done it any other way. I feel like I would have been missing something still if I didn't do it. So if you're going to do a through hike, I would say go for it all. You know, just do the whole thing. But, maybe you're the type of person that wants to experience a through hike for the whole, I guess, wilderness type aspect of it, then maybe that's what you want, and just do the traditional and don't do the total through hike.
Right, but like it sounds like you wanted to do it all because that's part of the Superior Hiking Trail, so you did the whole trail.
Yeah. So for me, yeah, I mean, I feel like if I didn't do that last 50 miles and just didn't do the total through hike and just did the traditional through hike, I feel like for me, at least, I would still feel like I did not do the through hike if I left that 50 miles off.
Well, I probably would have done, I don't know. I would have given up after 20 miles. But that's me who doesn't want to through hike at all.
But yeah, it's something that I mean, it's challenging. Like I said at the very beginning of this, I mean, I had I had an idea of what it was going to be in my mind, and I knew that I could physically do it, and that my goal of 3 weeks and 15 miles a day was not that it wasn't that absurd of an idea based on like what I've done in the past. I mean, it was more, but
Your goal
I
is 15.
I think it was a lot it was a lot more difficult than I expected, is what I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, and you did more than 15 a day a handful of times.
Yeah, and that's partly due to me not doing the 15 a day at the beginning too. So like I knew I knew the trail at towards the end was getting gonna get flatter, um, and not be as tough. So I knew I could make up some mileage. But yeah, there was some days where I made up a lot of mileage. I mean, my longest day was 28 miles, which was crazy, but it was fun.
28 miles. And that is why I was a little worried about the mental well being of Andy, because hiking 28 miles in the woods a day is quite a lot. And I know through hikers do it, but it's really intense. I mean, it seems like the average amount of miles a lot of through hikers do, especially on like the AT, is like 10 to 15 miles a day. So that 28 miles a day is a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot, and I mean, I just wish that. So I camped at a campsite, and I wish the next site was only like 2 miles more, so I could hit that 30-mile mark in the day. But the next campsite was like 7 miles away, and I was like, "There's no way I'm doing another 7 miles." I mean, it was close to getting dark and everything, and I was like, well, I was exhausted anyways. So, but if there was another site, I would have just been like, you know what? I gotta make the 30 miles. I gotta.
And this is where I remind listeners that at Hiking Through Life, we definitely support you in how many, like, you can do 1 mile, and that's amazing. Andy just likes to push himself and go a lot
Yeah.
of miles. But just know that even if you go like 1 to 2 miles, that's amazing. Just being outside and breathing in nature is what Hiking Through Life is definitely about, and all about just a life balance. But you should always go for your goals, and that's exactly what Andy did with his through hike.
Yeah, and your goals change as the hike goes on, and I found that out too. So, yeah, I mean, even though my ultimate goal was to do this through hike, finish it in 3 weeks, and I accomplished all of that. Um, there are little goals that you do from day to day that definitely change, and that was a big lesson I learned too. Is that you have to definitely be flexible on your hike. Um, I went into it like one of my goals was to not have any 0 days. 0 days like when you rest and you put 0 miles into the trail. I had that goal of not doing any of those and just hiking every day. But with my foot condition, and that was the day that you came up, um, I ended up taking a 0 that day. And I like to think that it wasn't a 0 because technically I hiked from the trailhead to my campsite, which was half a mile. So,
So you still hiked, but it doesn't count as the through hike.
yeah. Well, and I camped from the site that I stayed at that night down to the chalet too at the ski resort at the trailhead, which was about a mile. So,
So
technically it wasn't a
technically,
0, but like, I
so
mean,
being flexible.
yeah.
What other lessons did you learn?
So being flexible, I mean, that's like super important. I mean, I think you're going to come across things that you just really didn't anticipate in the hike. But um the other lessons I learned too, um one of the big ones is just like take care of yourself physically. Um and I think, I mean, even mentally and stuff like that too, but the physical things affect the mental things affect the physical things. It's a big circle. So the one thing I neglected was the physical side, I think, of things. And so I let my feet get worse than they should have gotten, and that affected my mental well being for a little bit of a time. So if I would have taken some more preventative measures or addressed some of the issues sooner, I don't think it would have gotten as worse as it did. So definitely do that. And I've even going into the hike, I knew that. Like, I had heard it from podcasts that featured through hikers. I read
Right.
it on different websites that
It's
had
kind of one of
articles
those
on through
things though,
hikers.
you when you experience it, that's when it becomes real.
Yeah. And so just taking the time to take care of yourself. So that's another lesson though, is just patience. And that's something that I developed more of throughout the hike is patience. Patience with getting from point A to point B. Like, you don't always have to go at an extreme pace, or you don't always have to, you know, get to the campsite right away. Stop, take your pack off, have a snack, let your feet rest, air your feet out. Like, take your boots or shoes off and take your socks off while you're taking a break.
Yeah, dry them out in the sun.
And yeah, and just having them breathe. Yeah. But then also patience of like, hey, you know what? I don't have to complete this many miles in a day. I don't have to complete this hike in 3 weeks, let's say, in my case. I could have drawn it out to 4 weeks if I wanted to.
Yeah, just kind of knowing that you can adjust it, and that goes kind of back to your flexibility.
Yeah, yeah. And just, yeah, having patience with, like, yourself while you're on the trail. Because there were times where I had tried to maybe push the pace a little bit more than I should have. I mean, there were times where I slipped on some boardwalks because I was trying to go a little too fast in some adverse conditions where my boots were muddy and then they slipped on the wood when I stepped on it, and I went down, got dirty. So that, or maybe I shouldn't have, done this or that on the trail. But one of the things that I kept saying on the trail too, when I got into that, I guess, I should have done this or I should have done that, and dwelled too much on the past of what I could have done better. A lot of times I just told myself it is what it is, you know.
Kind of just accept the moment. You
Yeah.
can't change what it could have been.
Yeah, so that's a lot of times I would catch myself like at the campsite with Allie discussing, well, I should have done this. Maybe I should have gotten my shoes earlier and not let my boots eat my feet up, you know, type of thing. But I always came back around to say, it is what it is. So I think that's kind of the bigger lesson I took away was it is what it is. You can't change the past. How do we move forward? How do I make the best of the situation? Type of thing.
Very applicable to all aspects of life. I
Yeah,
think a
and
lot of
it's
people can take that lesson away.
something that I think, well, I definitely being very analytical and inside my own head a lot will get into kind of sometimes that spin of, okay, well, reflecting on things, what should I have done in this situation, or that and that. And sometimes that can hold you back from certain things. And on this hike, I believe that I kind of learned more of like, you know, don't let that get you down. Don't let that hold you back. You still have a destination to get to. So I think there's something it, that everyone can take something from that and say, you know what, it is what it is. How do I move forward?
Yeah, I think a lot of people can reflect on that and take that in life and kind of hike on it. It's a really good lesson. So, yeah, kind of with that, is there any last insights or advice for future hikers that you might have, or next trail you're dreaming of going on? I
Um,
know you mentioned
there's
one,
which one?
the Colorado something or other.
Oh, the Colorado Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No. There's definitely more aspirations of through hikes from me on trails. I know you don't really want to do through hikes, but no, as much as there was a kind of a roller coaster of emotions on the through hike, difficulties and joys, I definitely want to do something like that again. Um, I don't know if I'm exactly ready to make the commitment of a Appalachian Trail through hike or a Pacific Crest Trail through hike. I think I do definitely want to do that at some point, but I think I would really enjoy a shorter one again, such as like the Colorado Trail, like you said. I think the Colorado Trail is, I forget exactly how many miles it is, but it's under, I want to say it's under 500. But it actually, somebody suggested that to me on the trail, and I was like, you know what? I'd never heard of that trail before, but it sounds awesome. I mean, we've been to Colorado a couple times, and the hiking out there is amazing. Another trail that I wouldn't mind doing is the Long Trail, which we visited this summer and did a couple days on. But that one's only about, I think it's 274 miles. Again, it would only take about 3 weeks, I think. So that one would be cool out in Vermont. But yeah, someday I want to do one of the big ones. But as far as, I guess, advice for other hikers, some parting words, I would say, yeah, take care of yourself. Listen to your body. That's one thing that you've always told me. But I didn't really realize what that meant until I was out there. And just how much one thing can affect all the other things.
Yeah, everything is connected within you.
Yeah. So, like, I guess the biggest thing I had was the issue with my feet. And so once that started up, it really just started affecting everything. Like, it affected my mood, it affected my outlook on the hike, it affected my just desire to keep going at one point. And then, yeah, I mean, once I started changing my pace to accommodate my feet and make it less painful, I mean, I started having like other issues because I was compensating for it. So it's like, okay, well, now my hip or my knee started hurting, and it's, yeah, one of those things that one thing can add up. And don't let it add up, though.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to like the whole, yeah, it is mental health awareness day basically. And it's just like, just know that if your body isn't in check physically, it definitely could affect your mental well-being like it kind of did to Andy on the trail in a very like small matter, nothing extreme, but it's just I know there are people out there who have like extreme cases of that. So just keep yourself in check and make sure you are taking care of yourself, whether you're on the trail, off the trail, wherever you are in your walk of life.
So, with all the physical activity day in and day out of hiking, I just noticed a change in my mental state too. It was one of those things where, like, every day I felt happy. I felt like nothing really bothered me that much. I mean, aside from the fact of my feet issues like early on and like the dreariness of the weather, but the more I hiked, so as the hike went on, I would just notice that yeah, there's this connection that you're talking about, and that we've seen in all of these different studies and the sciences behind it too, that the more physical activity you have in your life, the more your mental well-being is also positively affected.
Absolutely. And like I love that you saw that through your through hike. And I mean, even you don't need a through hike to do things like this. I don't want people to get that message at all because I'm not a through hiker, but I am very physically active on a day-to-day basis. And I am a super happy person. And I think a lot of people that surround me, that I surround myself with, like they know that I'm a super happy person because, and a lot of that is because of my physical well-being that affects my mental well-being. And like Andy saw that totally on the trail as he just shared.
Yeah, I think just me being out on the trail and isolating myself in a certain situation, not being distracted by a lot of other things, allowed myself to like really recognize that firsthand in my experience.
That's a really good point too. When you take away all the distractions of daily life, that's when you can really reflect upon kind of what matters the most. And that truly is yourself. As selfish as it sounds, I think you are the one who needs to be in check with yourself before you can be in check with the rest of the world.
Well, and that's exactly what I love about just backpacking or getting outdoors in general, is the disconnect from a lot of other things, and just being able to reset yourself and just really, like you said, get in tune with what is very meaningful and really get in tune with yourself. And once you are in tune with yourself, you are going to have that positive impact on those around you, and you will allow yourself then that capability to help those around you. Because if you're not in a stable state, you won't be able to help those around you and have that positive impact.
Yeah, that is totally true. And we've definitely like seen that and experienced that and we'll kind of leave you to think on that thought because it's a really powerful thought knowing that you are the most important person to take care of. Just kind of take care of yourself before you take care of anyone else. And with that, we let you kind of adventure on. And that's all. Thanks for listening. Much like going on a new trail or hike for the first time, creating your own podcast can be daunting and scary. But we at Hiking Through Life have found that Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. And the best part is that it's free and it's all right at your fingertips from your phone or computer. The creation tools on Anchor allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds just as you want it. And then they'll distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard everywhere like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more areas where podcasts can be heard. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. If you're ready to start creating your path of podcasting today, go ahead and download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. You've been listening to the Hiking Through Life podcast. Peace, love, and hike through life.